a story full of memories, and yes, great story. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Wendy Hollingsworth. Wendy's travelled all the way from Barbados. She's a graduate from Massey with a doctorate in biotechnology. So welcome, Wendy, welcome to the Manawatu, and welcome to New Zealand again.
Good. Is it afternoon? I'm sorry, my times are totally confused, as you would understand. But I'll say good morning because I'm sure somewhere, probably in Barbados, it's still good morning to everyone. And I would like to thank Craig and the team for inviting me to make the presentation. My presentation will be based on how do you actually go about, and I think it follows quite nicely from the previous presentations. How do you tell that story? And how do you tell that story about your specialty, about our specialty, I have to say our, specialty sheep milk products? And how do you do that to create the value and to ensure price premiums on your market, your target markets? And how do you actually do that as well within a legal framework, within a legal regime? So I'm speaking about location branding, and I will use the case of the Barbados black belly sheep, totally different from the sheep we've seen so far in different presentations, but that is our black belly sheep, and I will link the specialty sheep milk products, which are also can be known as origin link products. So when you hear me speak about specialty products and origin link products, they're basically one and the same thing. First, we'll start with the global context. Why are we doing this? Why is it important to be telling our stories and to have that legal framework to ensure that we, somewhere along the line, with other things as well, your marketing, et cetera, needs to be in place to have that price premium? One, as we're all here, we're all aware that there is that increased interest in sheep milk and sheep milk products. There's also that growing trend for consumers who are looking for products that are linked to a location. So for example, you will get, Barbados is a tourist destination, and you will get tourists coming to Barbados and they want to have that authentic experience, as they will go to the farm just to have that authentic experience. So how do you tie that authentic experience and that story into a framework? Also, they're looking for those products, again, that have that link to geography. So for example, when people think about New Zealand, they're thinking about, I'll say when I think about New Zealand, you're thinking open spaces, you're thinking green, lush, organic, and so traditional. And so you're trying to tie that into your product and also have consumers pay for that privilege of having that product that is originating from there. But you need to tell the story. And you need to wrap that story. When you saw some of the products, the products are very small, but you need to wrap that story into a very small package. And so therefore, as we heard from the previous speakers, what they're really doing is that they're building the reputation of that product. And so how do you guarantee that reputation is what I'll be talking about when I speak about the legal regime that you can actually do that within. So location. We hear that very often when it comes to where do you locate your business, etc. Location is important. In this case, we're talking about location from a geographical perspective, a country perspective, a region within that particular country. So what are the characteristics, really? When we speak of specialty products, or when we speak about origin-linked products, in this case, let's just make that distinction, we're speaking about products that are distinctive to a particular, it could be a particular country. In the case of Barbados, we're so small, it could be to a particular country, but even within Barbados, it can be to a specific region. So we're bounded by the Atlantic Ocean. We're also bounded by the Caribbean Sea. And so we can have production, sheep milk production occurring on the Atlantic side. And that milk can taste, the profiles, the flavor profiles can be completely different from milk, from sheep that milk that comes from sheep that are completely from the Atlantic side. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. Also, it's something that's grounded within the cultural aspects that are preserved through generations. So in New Zealand's case, sheep. When you hear about New Zealand, again, you think, okay, the place is run over by sheep. It's crowded with sheep. You have more sheep than you have people. So when you think about New Zealand, you think sheep. When you think about products coming from New Zealand or sheep milk products coming from New Zealand, you automatically assume that you know what you're doing. And you've been doing it for centuries. And also, there's that collective component. And when I say collective, it means that you have more than one producer within that particular territory that is producing according to those special know-how or whatever, whether it's in cheese production, whether it's in how you actually manage the sheep farms. What I also want to do is to tie the link between the location branding, or rather the geography, with branding. What you're really doing with branding is you're trying to to connect consumers. And we heard that earlier this morning. You're trying to connect consumers with your product. And then, as the previous speaker said, you're doing, and they do it quite well by telling that story. And having that story told, word of mouth is excellent. So your brands are really those elusive reputational assets that we have. And very often when we think about brands, we tend to think about our logos, things like that. But we don't necessarily really go into the essence of your brand. What is it that consumers are connecting with? So when they buy a Blue River's dairy product, and I can't remember what your product is, but when they buy cheese from your under your particular logo, what is it that they're buying into? They're buying into a product that has an excellent taste, yes, but they're also buying into the fact that on the farm, you have the lush green pastures, you do everything in a very sustainable manner, and that is what consumers are really looking for. So, and all of that is tied into your brand. I mean, if we really take a look at the brand value of some products, and I'll just step out of agriculture for a while and bring in an example, say for example of Nike. 95% or more of the value of Nike is not tied up in any physical assets at all. It's tied in those intangible assets that you were describing quite wonderfully before. So those elusive reputational aspects, they influence, that has an influence on consumer choice. So why would I go into a supermarket and I'll purchase a product that is $100 as opposed to purchasing a product that's $30 or $20? And they stand basically side by side on the supermarket shelves. It's that story that you're telling, that goodwill that you have associated with the product. And so it defines the consumer experience. And it's that emotional link to the consumer and your product that you're really, really trying to ground in the consumer mind with a particular location. So your brands have to convey trust. They trust the consumer, trust that what you say, that you actually are producing in that particular territory and you are producing according to the specific standards that have been set for the production of that particular product. Also, it has to be consistent, the brand has to be responsive, as well as that guarantee. And when I move further into looking at the different ways in which you can actually do that, what you're really, really looking for is a system of guarantee. The consumer wants to have that assurance that what you say your product can do, you're actually delivering on that product. So again, we're looking at that reputational value, and however you do that, inviting chefs to the farm, using social media to do that, you're trying to create that reputation. And also there's that image value. What does it say as a consumer for me to buy a product that's, worth a bit more on the market? So it's that whole image that comes with it as well. And what you want the consumer to do is be able to buy into these values. So how do you use various systems? And when we talk about marketing, the marketers will give you various ways in which you can do that. What I will do is to show how it can be done using a legal regime. So what role then, and when I speak about that legal regime, I'm talking about intellectual property. So what role does intellectual property play in branding? And specifically in branding specialty food products. Because as we heard earlier, you're really, in most cases, it's very small volume that you're putting on the market, and you're seeking to get a premium price for it. So we can do that, and we're very familiar with our trademarks. And we saw several trademarks here today. We saw the Blue River trademark. We saw several other trademarks, but our trademark regime is what we're familiar with. That is what you use to distinguish your goods and services from those of others in the market space. But you can also do it with patents as well, industrial designs, which is the shape of your bottle, your packaging, things like that. But our focus will be more or less on the trademarks and the trademark regime. What it also does as well is they're useful communication tools because it communicates to the customer or the consumer a set of attributes. Those reputations, those intangible attributes that your product will have. That is in addition to everything else, which is the flavor, the taste of the product, the color of the product, the aesthetics of the product. It also does communicate some other things as well. So how do we do that? You have, as I said, the typical trademarks, your logos that we're familiar with. I won't go into that in much detail, but you also have things like certification marks. This is where anyone who is, a set of standards have been set by a third party, and as long as you meet those standards, then you can use that mark. But what that does to the consumer is to say that you are producing by a set of standards, and in order to use this mark, you are certified. So you have, if you want, Big Brother kind of looking over you to ensure that you're meeting those particular standards. There are also collective marks. And this is where you have associations, so sheep farmers associations, example, and any of the members within that association can use those marks. But what I'm going to focus on is geographical indications. That is location branding. So we went through that, sorry. So how can you actually use GIs in order to do that? So what geographical indications are, there are signs which are used to represent regional goods. So basically what it says is that the goods that are produced within this particular region, within this particular area, have a reputation either because of the producers, because of the process that is being used, the know-how that has been collectively used within that region for a number of years, and in some cases it goes back to centuries. And typical examples would be like Scotch whiskey, would be champagne. Champagne is really sparkling wine. However, you can only use the word champagne on your product if it is produced within the Champagne region in France and by a certain group of producers in that Champagne region as well. So what it says to the consumers, when I drink a bottle of champagne, and if they are policing that geographical indication well, then I am buying something that is coming from a specific region, and it has a particular quality because of, as they claim, the soil in that area is very different. So the grapes that are produced in that area will have a different flavor profile, et cetera, which means that when the wine is being produced, it's going to be different. The flavors are going to be different. And also because the farmers in that area, the wine producers in that area, have developed a particular process over time that results in a product that is distinctly different from anything else that exists anywhere in the world. And so based on that uniqueness, you're basically saying, I'm charging a premium. If you want to have this experience, you will pay for the experience. But I guarantee that experience. So, as I said, sorry, I tend to like to drift away from the microphone every now and then, but OGIs are unique and distinctive signs. They still can fall under trademark regime, and as a matter of fact, in some countries that do not have geographical indications, legislation in place, they are protected under trademarks. But again, we're talking about those specific characteristics, and those specific characteristics have to be identified and they have to be documented, what they are. Sorry, I think that's a duplication. So what are those characteristics? We're looking at material characteristics. What is it that makes the product special? What is it about your cheese that is produced in a particular area in New Zealand that makes it special? What is it about anything else, the yogurt, etc.? What is it about the milk itself that makes it special because it is grown in that particular area? What are the specificity of the resources that are used in the production? Is it that you use a particular feeding system, etc.? As well as I mentioned, the know-how and that collective dimension. So some terms that you would actually note when it comes to geographical indication, you might hear indications of source, appellation of origin, origin-linked products, protected designation of origin, etc. Those are all terms that mean just about the same thing, geographical indication. And I just sort of throw this in, but in New Zealand, right now, I'm not too sure, but the last time I checked, you actually don't have your geographical indication legislation in place totally. You're on the road to getting it, and it only protects wines and spirits, so you haven't gone broader in terms of other agricultural products. But you do successfully use the trademark regime and the Fair Trading Act that can be used in that to protect specialty products. In Barbados, because now I'll start to focus on the black belly sheep. In Barbados, we do have a Geographical Indication Act, and that is what, if we are looking at the Barbados black belly sheep milk sector, which I must admit is a very, I think someone mentioned nano. I was trying to think of a term that is even more minute than nano. But it is an emerging sector. It is something that we are starting to look at. We focus largely on the meat, we focus on the leather, but we're now taking a look at the sheep milk to see how we can expand this particular sector. So that's our wonderful sheep. It is a hair sheep. And we're biased. We think it looks rather majestic. But again, I just draw your attention to those characteristics, and I'll go through those characteristics to show how we will be looking to have a geographical indication for the Barbados black belly sheep. So basically, when you're talking about the material characteristics, we're basically saying that the fatty acid content, the composition, the fat globules size, and other, the whole flavor profile of the sheep milk is different for the black belly sheep because of several reasons. And I'll go through just three. One, the breed itself that is being used, the feeding system that we use in Barbados, as well as the environmental and climatic conditions. So basically what we're doing here is just stating conditions that exist anywhere else, but we're saying because of the way Barbados is located, because of which has an impact on our climatic conditions, because of our breed, which is very special, etc. Our sheep and milk that is produced from our sheep is very, very unique and cannot be produced anywhere else in the world. And so on that basis alone, we will have a geographical indication, which means that our producers can then use that as a quality mark to put on their products. So in addition to their logo, they can also use this mark. So in terms of the animal breed, which again, we all know in terms of research, has an impact on the milk composition, proteins, milk fats, etc. The Barbados black-bellied sheep is unique in that it is, since the 1600s, was introduced into Barbados and has basically evolved as a cross between an African sheep and European wool sheep. And because of the isolated conditions in Barbados, it's an island, that sheep has basically evolved over the centuries to the typical, what we typically in Barbados have identified physiologically, as well as doing DNA fingerprinting as a Barbados black-bellied sheep. It's a hair sheep, as well as there are other characteristics in that it lambs year-round, maybe because of all the favorable climatic conditions, as it has several resistance, it has high resistance and tolerance to certain diseases, so it is used globally to integrate into breeding programs in the hope of transferring some of those characteristics into other breeds as well. So based on that, we're saying, and I haven't gone into all of the details in terms of the breed itself, but that's enough to show that, you know, it is unique in terms of its evolution. Also, the diet. Diet can influence the sheep milk composition as well. It has an impact on rumen fermentation and the way that we feed our sheep in Barbados, you know, in terms of our commercial mix, as well as it's fed on a special grass, which we call sour grass. The scientific name is there. Makes it unique. And not only that, you know, as I mentioned, we have the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the island is quite small, so we do get those you know, the grass tends to have a kind of a salty taste to it because you get that film of salt on it, and that has an impact on the composition. But more importantly, we also add molasses to our sheep feed mixes, and molasses being part of the process of rum production, it does give the milk a kind of a sweet flavor to it. So based on that, again, we're saying because of the feeding system that we use, which has evolved as well over the years, that can be used as a unique feature. And then the environmental conditions, which can, you know, heat and cold tend to have an impact on sheep milk composition as well. Our temperatures are mostly constant between 27 and 32 degrees. You do get hot days, and then sometimes, especially in December, you know, it can get brutally cold. You know, temperatures can go down to like 22 degrees or something like that. Yes. So based on that, we're saying we have those unique characteristics, and we can use the geographical indication regime to apply locally for protection, and then globally for prediction. What that means is that once we've done that, no one else anywhere in the world basically will be able to use the word or use the terms, and as well as any way we determine to depict it, Barbados black-bellied sheep milk on their products. They have to call it something else. It's like champagne. You have to call it sparkling wine, even though you go through the same process. Again, this is also based on the know-how in the feed-in lot system, the breeding programs as well, and then that collective dimension I mentioned. For geographical indications, it's not a single person that advances the application, but even when that application is advanced and you get the GI, anyone else within that region that produces according to the specifications, because you do develop specifications that say everybody has to produce according to this particular method in order to use that quality stamp. And I mentioned the reputation as well. So all of these actually go into developing a geographical indication. And so I just have a range of products. We went through a whole range of products. If you want to know why I'm standing here talking about sheep milk, while I'm interested in the sheep milk conference, is that my family, we actually are starting to make products from the sheep milk. We started making ice cream, as well as our confectionaries, in particular fudge, which has gone down very, very well. So that's it for me, and I know there are questions come in after. Thank you.
Those sheep don't look quite like our East Frisians, do they? Thank you so much, Wendy. Would you come back on the stage, please? In fact, would all the presenters come back so that we can take some questions now? Thank you. 5 minutes of questions, and please indicate for whom your question is for. Thank you.